So, our technology is not working today, so we're gonna have a nice intimate setting here today. We're gonna be learning a strategy for reading a lab handout. So we're gonna be starting doing labs next week, so we're gonna actually get into our lab. And I want you guys to know how to really take the handouts that I give you and do it accurately. So, how many of you have actually cooked something before? Good. So, have you seen someone cook before? Bake? Okay, good. Then we're on the same page. So, have you ever made a mistake when you were cooking? Okay, try and think of maybe why you made that mistake. So I just want you to think about it for 30 seconds, or why someone might make a mistake. Okay, so after you think about it, I want you to talk in your group of 3 about why you think a mistake came about.
Maybe you didn't know the right units, the symbols for what measuring cup you're supposed to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe you cooked it too long.
Cooked it too long.
Maybe you're distracted. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll write these down. So, cooked too long. Didn't know symbols. And distracted. So, how could you have fixed the problem for cooked too long?
Put a timer on the oven.
The timer. Okay. What if you didn't know how long to cook it? Could you have looked somewhere to figure out how long to cook it? Maybe in like your grandma's recipe book or online. So if you had a recipe to follow, you might know how long to cook it. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe it wasn't the timer. Or maybe you saw that it was 25 minutes, but you weren't really that worried about it. So you're watching a 30-minute show, so you're like, oh, when the show's over, I'll get it. But then it didn't taste that good. So if you didn't know the symbols, like you didn't know TSP is teaspoon or something, should you just keep going and just guess? Oh, TSP. That's like half a cup, right?
Yeah.
Probably not. So if you don't know, you can, like, where are some places you guys look for your information?
Internet.
Does anyone use books anymore? Yeah? A
Sometimes.
book? Maybe you could use a book. There's one other thing that I consult for information sometimes. Extra points if you can remember.
Family members.
A family member, another person. That's what I was looking for. Another person if you didn't know something. And distracted, we all get distracted. How can you fix your distractions?
Timers again.
Timers. Maybe if you had the recipe, you could kind of check off as you go. That helps me sometimes. Like if I know I have a lot to do that day and I get distracted, but check marking things off helps me.
To-do list.
Yeah, a little to-do list. So those are some things. So one of the things that would help you with all of these problems would be following a really detailed recipe. So if your grandma gives you a recipe and you don't know what she was talking about, or you don't know that a cup's a cup, then you just look that up or ask her, and then you can write little notes on the side to yourself. If you look at someone's recipe book, it usually just isn't the recipe, it's their own little handwritten notes so that they can understand it more. So this brings us to the steps to correctly carry out a laboratory procedure, because cooking can be a lot like doing a lab, because in the kitchen you're putting a bunch of things together, you might be heating it up, you might be cooling it down. Same thing in the lab, just with chemicals. So I have printed the steps out for you, but we're going to go through them together. So you're each going to get a highlighter, and it doesn't matter what color, so just pick a color. Okay. So step 1, we're just going to go over this briefly, and then we're going to do an example. I'm going to do an example for you. So step 1 is just to read the entire laboratory handout. If you don't know a technique, then you put a star next to it. so that later, after you've read the entire procedure, you can just go online or ask a friend or look in a book and see, oh, how do I use a burette again, or how do I use the scale properly? But you don't really want to stop in the middle of reading it, because then you're gonna lose trains of thought. And then again, if you have any questions about the procedure, just write it in the procedure and ask a friend first. If you and your friend don't know, you might want to come and ask me. The next step is to just highlight any amounts of a substance or a material that you would want to measure out. So the examples, so place 2 cups of flour and 2 eggs in the large mixing bowl. We would want to highlight 2 cups of flour and 2 eggs, so go ahead and highlight that now. And then for the next example, add 0.8 grams of sodium bicarbonate to the 250 milliliter flask. We would want to highlight 0.8 grams of sodium bicarbonate, because that's what we know, that's the number we want to look at. The next step would be to make a list of materials that you will need to gather prior to starting the experiment. This is important because you might get a lab handout and you might be reading it and you might have read it, but then you're in the lab and you just started doing things. And now all of a sudden it says, after adding that reagent, quickly put it in an ice bath, and you don't have your ice bath, so now your experiment's not going to be completely accurate because you didn't see that you needed that ahead of time. So that's why you want to make a list of everything that you'll need, so it's right there for you as soon as you need it. And then, so steps 1 through 2, if you want to make a little note on the side like this, these are prior to entering the lab. And then steps 4 through 5, you can go ahead and do this note too, that's in the lab. Okay. So step 4 is after you've made your list of materials, now you can go ahead and go in the lab and get the materials. Then before you start, you might just want to quickly reread through all the steps again, and then step 6 is to just go ahead and start performing the experiment and make sure you're doing step-by-step following instructions. If you have trouble keeping your place, again, do the check mark system like we were talking about with the recipes. So you could check mark after each step. So I'm gonna model one for you first, through the first 3 steps of what we would do. So Elephant's Toothpaste Lab Instruction Sheet. The first 3 paragraphs, does anyone know what this would be called?
Introduction.
Yep, so that's our introduction. So today we are just focusing on how to follow the lab procedure, so we don't need to look at the introduction, but those would be important for connecting the experiment to either the concept we're learning or a real life example. This lab instruction sheet is really nice because it already made the list of materials that you would need. So we don't necessarily have to make a list because it's already right here. But if you had one like this, you might want to go through and add some. And I'm going a little out of order here because that was just the next thing on the sheet. But remember, first what we're doing is reading the entire laboratory handout. So I'm reading through the materials and I'm thinking, oh yes, I know that we have all of these things in the lab, or oh no, I gotta remember my goggles because this is a dangerous experiment. So I better go to my locker and grab my goggles. So then I read through the procedure. Number 1, get 20, that's supposed to be mils, get 20 mils of warm water. Wearing goggles, add 1 scoop of yeast to the warm water and let it dissolve for 3 minutes. Oh, I forgot what dissolve means, so what should I do? I know, I'll put a star there. So I'm going to keep going though, because I don't want to look up what dissolve means right now. While waiting, measure 120 milliliters hydrogen peroxide with the graduated cylinder and add it to the plastic water bottle. Ooh, again, I remember we talked about how to read a graduated cylinder, but I can't remember if the meniscus is like how I'm supposed to do that, so I'm going to star that too, and I'm going to look at that later. Step 4, add 3 drops of food coloring to the plastic bottle. Easy. Add 1 dropper full, about 10 drops of dishwashing soap to the plastic bottle. 6, place the bottle in the center of the tray, no other materials, and it goes on and on. I didn't really have any questions about this procedure. I just had things that I needed to look up. So I would go over to my computer over here, and I would say, what does dissolve mean? And then it's going to tell me the answer. And then the other one was graduated cylinder. I'm going to look up a YouTube video, and I'm going to say, how do I read the amount on a graduated cylinder? And then I would be good with that part. And then, like I said, this one had the list of materials. So we don't need to add anything in that. Now, if I saw something like water bottle, and let's say that this wasn't in the list, then I would just add water bottle. Okay. And then after you get in the lab, then you can take your list over, get your materials, and then bring them back, quickly skim through again, and then perform the experiment. So we're good on that one. The next one, I want you guys to do in your groups and just follow your steps. And you only have to do steps 1 and 2. We're only going to do steps 1 and 2. So just start this process of what you would do. So when it says read the entire laboratory handout, I'm only asking you to go to step 2. Where it says procedure.
I don't know what borax is, so I'll probably have to look that up, right?
Right. So what do you put next to borax then?
I put a star.
Okay. So as you're reading, just make sure that you're following these steps. So the first step is to just read it, but we're only reading to 2. So have you read steps 1 and 2 so far?
Okay, just up to 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Highlighting the notes.
Yep, and putting a star if you're confused by anything. Put a star next to it.
1 cup of borax solution. 2 tablespoons of warm water. 1 teaspoon of borax powder.
Okay. I know some of you are still working, but we're just going to talk about it really quick. So, the first step says, label 1 cup borax solution and the other cup ball mixture. Some of you highlighted 1 cup borax solution because you saw a number in a measurement, but this is just telling you to label something, so that you didn't really need to highlight because you weren't going anywhere to measure out 1 cup of anything. The next step says pour 2 tablespoons warm water. So that, I saw you guys highlighting 2 tablespoons warm water. That would be something that you would want to highlight. And then the next, and 1/2 teaspoon of borax powder, another thing that you would want to highlight. And then Sam said that she wasn't sure what borax was, so she put a star by that. So that's good. So she had done step 1A. And then we're doing step 2 right now with the labeling. And as you go into the cup labeled borax solution, stir the mixture to dissolve the borax, add food coloring if desired. So there was no other measurements. Did anyone star anything else? Or do anything else? So what's step 1 again? Think about it and then tell your partners.
Read the entire thing.
Step 1 of the lab
Yeah.
reading.
Of the how to read the lab
Okay.
procedure.
So we read the whole thing first.
Mm-hmm.
Want to do the next one?
Number 2 is where we highlight the amount of substances, like we did with 2 tablespoons of warm water.
And then Wes, what's step 3?
Step 3 is making a list of materials that we need.
So we didn't do that yet. So what would one material be that you would want from step 1?
We need
At
2
least
cups.
2 different cups.
Yep, you need 2 cups. So you would have another sheet of paper and you would write down 2 cups. How about from step 2? Can someone give me something else that we would need?
We need 2 tablespoons of warm water.
And I don't think we need to do any more. I think you guys get the idea with that. And then the next would just be to go take your list into the lab, get your materials. How about step 5?
Review one more time before you start.
Yep, that's really important because if you read it the night before, you probably don't remember it the next day. And then step 6 is to actually go ahead and perform the experiment. So now, I want to see if you guys can do this and make some ice cream. So on the back of your notes that tell you how to read the laboratory procedure, if you just turn that over, it's a checklist of each step so that as you're going through, you remember to do each step. And this has a little less words in it so that if the other one's too wordy for you, just look over and you can just use this as your notes instead. So, get you. Okay, so there's 2 different lab handouts, and I did this on purpose because I wanted you guys to see the different ways that you might get laboratory instructions. So some of you might have different materials, but it all does the same thing. And then remember, this is written just like I would give it to you, so there's an introduction, there's questions, but don't worry about the questions for today. And just follow your checklist.
Okay.
So yours might have a list of materials or it might not have a list of materials. So you might have to make a list or you might not. And you might say, this already had it for me, and you would just want to put a little box around it and say I'm good to go. So it looks like everyone's doing good with step 1, reading the entire lab procedure. Maybe doing a little bit of highlighting of the amounts while you're reading. Okay, so if you're done with step 1 through 3, you can start going over and getting your materials after I check the list that you need. So some things you might wanna think about are how you're actually gonna measure out different substances. So if you just said sugar, are you just gonna bring it over in your hand? Probably not. So remember that too. So just to add those.
Measuring cups and measuring spoons.
And then how are we doing over here? Looks like we got steps 1, 2, 3 already checked. We highlighted all the amounts. Looks good.
I'm done too.
So, another thing is you can highlight other important information that you see, but just make sure that if you're doing that, you might want to use 2 different colors. So if you say, oh, a small plastic bag, that's important, I want to highlight that, maybe do that in orange and then use blue to highlight the amount so that when you go over, you just know, you can just quickly look and see the amount that you need. But that's a good point because you might highlight other important information too. But you are all good to go start making your next cream. I like the shaking technique. Looking good. Okay, so Wes did a perfect job following his instructions. He was patient, he looked at his timer, he waited at least 5 minutes, he kept feeling his bag like the instructions said, and now he's enjoying his ice cream. Whereas someone else, which was me, did not wait the full 5 minutes, and I am now enjoying a milkshake. So even though this is kind of silly here, this wouldn't be good if this was chemicals because you could have some bad reactions happening. Okay, so you guys all enjoyed your ice cream. Do you think that you followed the instructions correctly?
Mine was kind of soupy. So
Kind of
I
soupy.
don't think so.
So probably not. So you probably missed instruction in there. Were you following all 6 steps? Did you reread the
I thought I
experiment?
did, but I guess I didn't shake it long enough.
Okay, so you did follow the procedure, you just got a little impatient. So that's okay. So it's not as important today because we were making ice cream and this was just sort of a fun experiment, but just remember that when you're in the lab and they give you times that you want things to stir or mix, you really want to commit to that or else you're not going to get the results that you want to get. So I think that you guys have a pretty good handle on these 6 steps. So for your homework, I'm going to give you your lab that we're going to be doing next week. And I just want you to do the first 3 steps at home and you have a week to do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. So here's your lab handouts and you guys are dismissed when the bell rings and have a good day.
Thank you.